How do you scale meaningful education for a diverse global population without locking it behind proprietary walls? Well, in today's episode, I'm joined by Scott Anderberg, CEO of Moodle. And we're going to look at how open source technology is unlocking new paths to learning for communities all around the world. And Scott's career has taken him from a help desk in Denver to executive roles in 4 continents, culminating in his leadership at one of the most impactful learning platforms in the world. And with nearly 150,000 registered Moodle sites and over 460 million users, Moodle's footprint speaks for itself. But the story behind those numbers is even more compelling. So today we're going to explore how Moodle's open source DNA is empowering developers, educators, and indeed learners to create custom learning environments. Environments especially in places where traditional access to education is extremely limited. And from MoodleBox being used in areas without electricity to entirely reimagine learning models like its Inventorium in Australia, the platform proves that education doesn't need to be a one-size-fits-all. So Scott's going to share how Moodle is approaching AI with intent and caution, and rather than rushing in to build new flashy features, how Moodle is focused on community-led experimentation and allowing the most valuable use cases to emerge organically from that community. And for me, it's this measured, grounded approach that reflects Moodle's ongoing commitment to everything from inclusion to flexibility and long-term impact. So, what if the future of education isn't about chasing tech trends, but building adaptable tools that meet people where they are, wherever they are? And with that scene set, allow me to officially introduce you to Scott now. So thank you for joining me on the podcast today. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Great. Thanks, Neil. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Scott Anderberg. I'm the CEO at Moodle. I have spent my entire career in the online learning space, most of that in the online higher education space, and got my start actually in the LMS space, specifically at a company called eCollege that was operating out of Denver. I started there on the help desk, actually, and then worked my way through the organization to the product organization, and then through a number of sales and account management roles. And then that company was ultimately acquired by Pearson in 2007. That led to my first international relocation. My family and I headed to London. I came over in a market development role to try and determine where that solution set could sit outside of the United States. Spent about 3 years doing that. And ultimately went back to head up some product changes based on what we'd learned while being outside of the U.S. market. Some changes in Pearson's strategy at the time opened up an opportunity for me to head to Australia and start Pearson's online program management business there. And so I got that off the ground. Spent 3.5 years in Sydney. We came back to the U.S. Right at the tail end of 2015. Thinking we were going to get settled down and stay for a while, and 12 months into that, decided we were not quite as ready to be settled as we thought, and that coincided with an opportunity to come back to London. And so I came back, stepped back in to lead Pearson's OPM business for things outside of the US, did that until Pearson decided to wrap that business up and carve it out and sell it. And at the time, just after that transaction, I had the opportunity to step into this role. So I started with Moodle in February of last year. So now just approaching the 18-month mark, actually.
Wow, what a journey you've been on there, from help desk to CEO of Moodle, from USA, Australia to the UK. I mean, how was your journey across different roles in different continents in online education? Has that shaped your views on the value of things like open source in learning environments? You must have picked up a few tales and learnings along the way.
Yeah, I mean, my time living, moving, traveling internationally has been a huge influence on what I care about, what I want to do. My own university experience was a transformative experience for me. Really opened me up to thinking about the world in different ways, exposed me to different people thinking in different ways. I came out of that very excited. It wasn't hard at all as a result to begin to move into a career that worked around the edges of higher education. And then when I was in that market development role, when I lived in London the first time, I spent a lot of time in the Middle East and Africa, getting to know those developing economies much better. And it became so apparent how the availability of high quality education changes the entire profile of a society and the opportunities that are present. And it has been the pursuit of opportunities to drive access to education that have really pushed the rest of my career forward. So when the opportunity to join and lead Moodle came up, I couldn't think of a better organization focused on driving access for education through open source technology. So this has been a great next step and a really good fit for my values and my passion.
And working across, 4 continents is phenomenal. It must give you such a different world view, so valuable. And one of the things I was reading about you is obviously open source is something that's something you're incredibly passionate about. So why is it you think open source is so uniquely suited to address the global challenges that face education today in this AI era that we find ourselves?
So until I started working with Moodle, I had very little open source experience, actually. I cared a lot about access, but I hadn't really thought about open source. And so being here has added a layer of understanding to that, where I really see the value of that. I'm not technical. While I worked in the product organization earlier in my career, it was as a business analyst. I'm not a coder. I'm not an engineer. And so as I've begun to understand open source better and really the value of the open source community, the values that underpin that, there are a few things that have really risen to the surface that I think are so valuable about open source. But they're about the idea of open source, what open source facilitates. I've talked about this a couple of different places recently, but I think the first of these things is that open source really encourages diversity. And it is because open source is available to anyone, then everyone actually gets to play. And all of those ideas pour into it. Last year, we released an incredible amount of code that came from the community themselves and is now part of Moodle. Those are things that even if we had thought of them, we wouldn't think of them the same way, because the origination of that idea comes from the context in which those individuals sit, and they become really valuable components of what we do, so that it becomes a much more diverse solution, and as a result can meet a much more diverse set of needs. The second is that I think it facilitates inclusivity. Because it's open, everybody gets to play. So you now have this broad set of ideas, but you also have the opportunity for those ideas to actually become manifest in the outcome. And so you get something much richer than you would get if it's just a closed single set of developers working on a single set of problems or solutions. And the last thing is that I think it really fosters creativity, because the sky's the limit. I mean, one of the things about open source is that it's software the way that you want to have it based on what you want to make it do. And so all of these creative ideas get to pour in. And as I think about my own experience in education, those are the things that seem to rise to the surface when I have the best learning experiences, or I reflect on where those learning experiences have been really rich. It's because they were diverse. They were full of lots of interesting people, all of whom got to participate in the discussion, and they were approached from a creative problem-solving kind of way. I think that's the kind of environment that we need to be fostering to have really rich educational experiences, and I think open source is fantastic at that.
And in what ways would you say Moodle embodies the principles of open education here in 2025? And how have you seen that mission evolve over the years?
Well, that's been at the heart of Moodle's mission from the time it was created. When Martin Duguayama set out to build this, it was always intended first and foremost to be an open source project, that Moodle would be fully open, that the code would be fully available, and that it would be something that could be accessed and implemented without licensing fees attached to it. And as I've stepped into this role and we think about the future of Moodle, there's a lot of things we're thinking about that are exciting in terms of additional commercial avenues for Moodle to ensure the sustainability of the organization long into the future. But what is a very solid commitment is that we will always be an organization that creates a fully open, freely available, enterprise-capable LMS at the heart of our value proposition.
And to bring to life everything you're talking about there, are there any examples that you might be able to share where you've seen where open source tools have made education more accessible, more equitable? You must get to see and hear a lot of those. I think it really helped bring it to life.
Well, I think the thing that's closest to home for me is just to look at what Moodle's footprint actually is. So Moodle is as of today has almost 150,000 registered sites around the world. And across those registered sites, there's 460 million users that are on Moodle. We operate across almost every vertical possible: higher education, further education, K-12, business, government, nonprofits, NGOs. And it's being used in some really remote parts of the world. Some of the things that you can use and attach to Moodle that are really good examples of this as well. MoodleBox provides you the capability of putting Moodle onto a device that allows you to take it into remote areas and utilize it where there is no electricity, no network. And so we hear stories all the time about this being utilized in really remote places to access communities that would otherwise not have the opportunity to take advantage of education in this way. And we saw that used a lot actually over the course of the pandemic to make sure that we could see good access into places when it was very difficult to travel or get things that around the world.
And I think one of the things that's always stood out about Moodle is it has a passionate online community, and it also empowers physical communities. So how do you see that role of community-driven development? How do you see that influencing maybe the future of educational platforms like Moodle?
It's a really, really important part of what we do. So what open source does is what I talked about before, which is encourages that inclusivity. And it's the community who end up being the participants and the beneficiaries of that. And then we benefit from it, and then the broader world gets to benefit from it. So it's hugely important. Every single time we release Moodle, we're releasing components of code that came from the community. Some of the features that have been added that people are the most excited about are ideas that came out of the community. In some cases, were developed entirely by them. We have over 2,000 plugins and extensions that sit in the Moodle plugin directly, developed by community members that allow people to leverage capability that extends the use of Moodle or allows them to adapt Moodle or integrate it with other systems elsewhere. And that's all done because they're interested developers out there in the Moodle community bringing their innovation and their ideas to bear.
And what would you say to any institution or people listening, that maybe a business leader that's still hesitant about embracing open source due to any perceived risks around support or security and all those things that might be holding them back? What would you say to those people?
I think what you've said there is really important. These are perceived risks. A lot of these things are myths. There is a persistent myth that open source software is not as secure as others. And that's just absurd. That's the perspective that somehow inherently that's a higher risk with open source. And in reality, in many cases, open source is more secure simply because it has a higher number of people looking at it, implementing it, testing it, checking on it, communicating about vulnerabilities, offering solutions to those vulnerabilities. The number of testing cycles it goes through is larger by a magnitude in most cases. So, if security is a concern, I would suggest that, like many things, it's about the underlying software. But Moodle is an incredibly secure platform and is certified for all of the major ways that we would want people to be assessing security across the platform. I think support is another one where there is this misunderstanding that because it's open source, it's just developed and there's no organization around it. In our case, Moodle has both its own support organization, but the community operates as a support organization in its own right. There are probably more people actively working to respond to support tickets on Moodle than most other systems in the world, because the community sees themselves as something that's, always giving back and working with each other. So, I think it depends on what the platform is and what the strength of the community is, but open source platforms with a strong community participation like Moodle have probably offer more value in those places where those myths exist than closed proprietary systems do.
And I think that is such an important point to stress there. I'm glad we finally laid to rest some of those myths and misconceptions. And for educators and administrators that might be listening, any advice on how they should better leverage the flexibility and customization offered by some of these open source tools to better serve diverse learner needs, because everyone learns differently now?
Yeah, I think it's hard to sit here and try to offer advice when learning is so highly localized, right? It's very specific. What I would say is that there is a huge benefit in open source tools and what you said, which is they can be customized to meet the demands of whatever your specific use cases are. And we see a lot of that. One of my favorite examples is a woman that I've met and worked with a little bit in the last 18 months who's created something called the Inventorium. And it's a solution specifically for at-risk students in Australia for whom the traditional high school system just didn't work. And so these were students who had dropped out. And she's created an entirely customized version of Moodle that is both gamified and is fully self-driven. Students pick their curriculum on their own. They create their own learning paths. They work with a personalized coach. And she's getting unbelievably strong results with students who just would never have succeeded inside a traditional learning environment. And that's because what she did is she identified the learning needs of those students and could use a system as flexible as Moodle to respond to those needs in a way that allowed them to operate and learn in the ways that were appropriate to them. And that's just one example. We see that a lot. Sometimes it's simply in the look and feel. Sometimes it's in the way the functionality works. Sometimes it's in the extension and interoperability that it creates. What Moodle allows you to do is assess what do your learners really need and make sure that you can meet them in that need.
And we are 20 minutes into a tech podcast, and we've not mentioned AI yet, which must be some kind of record. But as we look ahead, are there any innovations or big shifts that you see shaping the next phase of open source in education? What excites you there?
So I do think AI is a big one. As you say, it's inevitable not to think about what role it's going to play. We're taking a very measured approach to AI, but one that we think is actually probably a much wiser approach. I don't think most organizations or individuals really know what functions of AI are going to prove to be valuable or useful to users. There's so much left to learn. Developing native AI capabilities is expensive and it's a little bit risky. And one of the advantages we have is because of that large community that resides all over the world, we have the opportunity to really observe what's happening. So our first work on AI is to create an AI subsystem, which we released in Moodle 4.5, which means the community has the ability to develop on top of that subsystem. And we can begin to observe what's really working, what's driving value. What do we think are the really creative, innovative ways to develop? We have some small things that we're doing in every release to add native functionality, but our interest is in really assessing what's going to be useful to those that are actually delivering education. And that approach also addresses some of the really challenging parts of AI use, which are, again, learning is so localized and AI is becoming something that you have to think about in very local context. What are the regulatory environments around it? What are the affordability constraints around it? And by operating this way, the development and use can happen within the constraints of that local environment. So I'm excited to see what happens. We're already seeing plugins added to the plugin directory that are leveraging that subsystem and bringing AI capability from the community along with the things that we're developing ourselves. So is it going to be a game changer? And are we really excited about it? Absolutely. Do we think we can forecast exactly in what ways that's going to be yet? No, and we don't think we need to. We think that leveraging that creativity that's out there and continuing to build on it and work on it together is going to provide some really exciting and interesting solutions over the next couple of years.
Love what you're saying about leveraging that creativity out there, seeing what you can produce together. It's so important, especially when we're talking about technology. It's humans in the loop, the collaboration piece. That's where the magic happens. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights and also busting a few myths and misconceptions about open source today. I'm going to see if there's something we can do in return for you here, because some of the biggest names in business, VC funding and tech have either been guests or maybe even listened to this podcast. Maybe a friend of a friend might do. But is that a person that you'd love to have a private breakfast or lunch with? Who would it be and why? He or she might just get to hear this. Let's see what we can manifest together.
I'd probably have to pick Malcolm Gladwell. I've been a very big fan of his work and his writing, particularly a fan of revisionist history and some of the most recent books that he's put out. The reason I'm interested is because I think he's a fantastic storyteller, but I think he's a great storyteller because he asks really interesting questions. Right. The most satisfying conversations that I have with people, but especially people I've just met, are the ones where they ask really interesting questions. And you can see throughout his work, he is an inherently and innately curious person. And that curiosity comes out in really interesting questions. So I'd love the opportunity to sit down and have a meal with him.
Oh, wow. Such a great choice. Well, we'll throw that out into the universe. Let's see what we can manifest there. And for anyone listening that would just like to maybe find out more information about Moodle, your community, connect with you or your team, where would you like to point everyone?
Moodle.com. That's the best place to go. Check us out there. You can find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out, message me there, and we'd be happy to have a conversation with you.
Well, so much I've loved about talking with you today. Yes, about the technology, the impacts it will have. But I think at the very heart of what we're talking about here, it's community, it's collaboration, and how open source is uniquely suited to address some of the global challenges that face education today. I'd urge everyone listening to check out Moodle.com. Feedback, let me know your thoughts on anything we talked about today. But more than anything, just thank you for shining a light and starting a conversation around this.
Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Really appreciate the opportunity. Great to chat with you as well, Neil.
I think today's conversation with Scott offered a powerful reminder that access to education is still one of the most transformative forces that we have. And that open source technology can be one of its strongest enablers. In fact, I would argue it is. And through Scott's global experience and the evolving mission of Moodle, we heard today how customization, inclusivity, community collaboration, these are all much more than nice to haves. They're actually a core requirement for meeting the needs of learners who might have been left behind by traditional systems. And whether it's supporting at-risk students through reimagined learning tools or researching disconnected regions with tools like MoodleBox, I think the flexibility of open source is continuing to open new doors. And that's why it was great to unpack some of the myths that surround open source, from whether it be concerns about security to assumptions around support. Scott was very clear here. A well-supported open source platform like Moodle isn't just capable, it's proven. And with it comes emerging technologies like AI, the platform's steady community-first strategy. All these things are models that many could learn from. So as the education sector begins to rethink how it delivers value in an AI-driven, increasingly digital world, maybe the question isn't, hey, which platform is most powerful, but which one empowers the most people and works with communities, whether they be online or in a physical sense? And how are you making learning more accessible? And who are you building it for? So Scott spoke to us from 4 continents today. I know we have people listening in 165 countries looking at the download figures each month. So wherever you are in the world, tell me what Moodle means to you. Good, bad, indifferent. I'll just open the door on this and let me know your thoughts. Please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, LinkedIn, X, Instagram, just at Neil C. Hughes. And it doesn't have to be Moodle either. You could just tell me your thoughts on the open source community or anything that sparked a thought or idea in your head after listening to the conversation. So I'll let you marinate on that, and I'm going to go off and prepare tomorrow's guest for you. So thank you for listening as always, and I'll speak with you all again very soon. Bye for now.